Hello and welcome to the third part of the Webpack series. My name's David Thorne, and in this video we're going to be talking about how to load CSS into JavaScript modules. So what does that mean? That means that you can write a CSS file and have it in your source directory, and inside of one of your JS files you can then import that, which is telling Webpack, I need the contents of this CSS file in order to style whichever component or whatever it is that you are going to be programming. There are some downsides to this, and there are also some pros and cons or whatever. But let's just get into loading CSS into our JavaScript modules, and then you'll see how it works and what the negatives and positives are of doing it. So let's move over to the documentation from Webpack, read that first, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so loading CSS. In order to import a CSS file from within a JavaScript module, you need to install and add CSS loader and style loader and CSS loader to your module configuration. So let's go ahead and copy this, and we're going to add style loader and CSS loader to our package.json. So let's go ahead and execute that. And once that's loaded, we can have a look at our package.json. Okay, so now our package.json, you can now see we've got CSS loader and style loader also. Now, if you haven't already looked at watched the previous video about the configuration file, then I suggest you go back and watch part 2, because that shows you how to add the configuration file. Although you can pretty much just look at it now and it's exactly the same thing. So let's go over to the documentation to read what information we need to put inside of our configuration file. Okay, so we scroll down and we see that we've already got the basic elements in our file already, but now we need to add this modules rules segment. So let's copy this, shall we? And then move over to Visual Studio Code so as that we can add it. Okay, in here we can just then paste it in, and I like Visual Studio Code. We can essentially just highlight this and then delete it, add our comma, and then format code, and that gets it done. So what's happening here? Well, let's read the documentation to see what it's doing. Okay, Webpack uses a regular expression to determine which files it should look for and serve to a specific loader. In this case, any file that ends with .css will be served to the style loader and the CSS loader, as stated by this regular expression here. This enables you to import a style.css file into the file that depends on that styling. Now, when that module is run, a style tag with the stringified CSS will be inserted to the head of your HTML file. Let's try it out by adding a new style.css file to our project and import it in our index.js. So let's go ahead and make a styles.css in our project. Let's create this then, and then we can do what the documentation says. Add this into our style.css, come back here, paste that in, save it, come back to the documentation again and continue reading. Okay, we now need to import it in our index.js and add the hello to the element as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and do this. Oops, come in here. And we need to import this here, and it said then go, elements dot class list dot add hello, I believe it was. Yes, it is. And semicolon on the ends. Let's go back to the documentation and see what it says now. Now run your build command. Okay, one thing we have to do before we actually continue that is to change in our, we changed it to the file name to be bundle here, and in our index.html we need to make sure we change bundle here, otherwise it won't work. So now we've changed that, and we can now run our commands for, let's clear this, and npx Webpack and once it decides to do it, then it's going to do it. Okay, we still see that it's outputted a bundle.js, and that we can see that it's actually doing something with the it here. All right. Now you'll notice that there's no CSS file that's been outputted here, and also in the index.html there's no changes to it. So Webpack has not touched that index.html. One second. Sorry, just to show you again, you can see the index.html has not been modified by Webpack at all. Okay, but if we come and run it in the web browser, so let's just put it in here and then come to here again, and now you see that Webpack is then red. Okay, the text is red. And why did this happen? Well, let's have a look at the developer tools, and you'll notice, as it said in the documentation, that it added the style in text in the header tag right here, and it's not added a CSS file. So now all of the CSS that we've written inside of our style.css is added to a style tag, all right? And it only happens once then the file has been run. So there's no CSS files being loaded. This is essentially a positive if you're creating a small project. It means that you can write all of your, you can have all of the CSS files within inside of one little module or one little folder, and you can always import it, and then it's going to add all of the CSS in the various style tags when you do it. Negative is if this is a big project, the web page is going to take longer to load because it's executing, it's adding all of this CSS into the head within the JavaScript, which means that you're not utilizing the browser's job basically, and where you can provide it with a CSS file, and the browser can do that by itself. All right, but for small changes and small projects, it's fine. But if we keep reading what the documentation says, and come back to the documentation once again, and see here, now you're right. Okay, open up the index.html in your browser again, and you should see that the hello Webpack is now styled in red. To see what Webpack did, inspect the page. Don't view the page source, as it won't show you the result because the style tag is dynamically created by JavaScript. And look at the page head tag. It should contain our style block that we imported in index.js. Note that you can, and most cases should, minimize CSS for better load times in production. On top of that, loaders exist for pretty much any flavor of CSS you can think of, Post CSS, Sass, and less, to name a few. Okay, so this gives you an indication of how you can use loaders for CSS in the most basic form. This is an introduction to it. I wouldn't do it this way. If you've got a quick small project, then do it this way. But if your project's going to get bigger, this is not the way to do it. All right. And in the next video, we will discuss how you can then compress all of your CSS into either one or more files and let the browser load your CSS files as well. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I hope this small bit has been a good introduction of loaders. There's a lot more to talk about, but for the sake of this CSS and style loader, it was already enough. But we'll have a look in the next video about how to extend this a little bit further by using another plugin. Okay, if you do have any questions, write them in the comments. If you want to subscribe. Otherwise, don't. There's no problem. If you want to like. If you didn't like it, thumbs down and write me a comment and tell me why. Okay. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.